Hello, my name is Mireille Bourgeois, and I'm the Artistic Director of IOTA Institute. Welcome everyone to the seventh and final event of the Bioart Kitchen Hangout series, co-presented by IOTA Institute and Incubator Art Lab. This series began in 2020 as a pandemic response project in which we invited artists to present a virtual bioart protocol or show and tell. And today we're welcoming Mary Maggic for their workshop titled The Making of Postnatural Flesh, SCOBY WOMB. Mary is tuning in from Vienna, and our collaborator, Dr. Jennifer Willett, and her team at Incubator Art Lab are joining us from Windsor, Ontario, in the territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. Amanda Shore and I from IOTA are joining from Chipuktuk, known as Halifax, on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This Bioart Kitchen Hangout series is presented with the support of Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Mary Maggic is a non-binary Chinese-American artist and researcher working with the fuzzy intersections of body and gender politics and capitalist ecological alienations. Based in Vienna since 2017, Maggic frequently uses biohacking as xenofeminist practice of care that serves to demystify invisible lines of molecular biopower. Maggic is a recipient of the 2022 Knight Arts and Tech Fellowship, and they're a current member of the online network Hacteria, Open Source Biological Art, and the Asian Feminist Collective Mailing. We're so pleased for Mary to close off this 3-year-long series with a workshop that explores a low-cost rotating disc bioreactor appropriated from industrial designs of microbial cellulose production, or SCOBY. The SCOBY WOMB workshop is part of the project Faster, Higher, Stronger, a cross-species fitness installation where humans and non-humans train together to achieve the fantasies for optimized flesh. Welcome, Mary. I'm going to pass it over to you to talk to us about your artistic practice. Thank you so much for being here.
This is a great opportunity for me as well. Thank you so much, because this is actually my first time presenting this project officially, and I just did a workshop version of this project in Corfu for the TTT Labs BioFaro Beach Camp. So this is a really great, I think, milestone in the project, because I believe as artists, we're not just, existing in the gallery, but we're also communicating knowledge, and we're sharing resources and other ways of viewing the world. So this is really exciting. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so that we can get into the presentation. Is it working? Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start with the overall background of this project before I get into like the biohacking and kind of like the technical specifications. So the overarching research is called Faster, Higher, Stronger. And this title is actually appropriated from the official motto of the Olympic Games, which is Citius, Altius, Fortius in Latin, faster, higher, stronger. And recently they updated the motto to say faster, higher, stronger together. So I'm kind of drawn to all of the symbolic representations of the Olympics, this kind of this unity. Oh, really? Okay, let me try that again. Okay, so I'll stop and start it up again. Okay. Is it back? Okay. Is it better if I full screen it, or should I keep it not full screen? Okay, all right. Yeah, so the symbolic representations of the Olympics and how they're trying to promote this unity across, nations and cultures, and but they're doing it through this like athletic, competitive um, system, right? So, and I was interested in how the nature of competitive athletics, how it's always kind of in this direction of progress, of advancement, of optimization, and the production of the fittest body. And these aesthetics, of course, like I'm also interested in how these aesthetics are transferred to the non-human and the way that we industrialize the non-human. So back in like the Roman Empire and like when they first started having these Olympic festivals, um, these athletes would train at these gymnasiums, and these were very elite spaces. And actually, women and slaves and disabled people were not even allowed to enter these spaces. But these athletes, these male athletes, they were regarded as, such, examples of fitness that their sweat was even collected because they thought that, oh, like this sweat must have like medicinal properties or like enhancement properties. So I kind of see this as the really early stages of basically like the Western world defining what is fitness, what is a valuable body, what is a acceptable body in the competitive world. So, and then these aesthetics of, faster, higher, stronger have basically continued up until now. So now we have the modern manifestation of the Olympic Games. We have all of these kind of scandals of athletes doping and doing all kinds of, taking performance enhancement drugs to, doing all these crazy things to win the gold medal, right? So what is the body that is worthy of winning the gold medal? So bring that to the way that we industrialize the non-human. So I got really interested in, again, this concept of faster, higher, stronger, but in the way that we industrialize certain organisms. So in this case, these are very early models of a rotating disc bioreactor. So bioreactors are very common in scientific labs whenever you're trying to grow an organism. But then the way you do it is under these artificial conditions of optimizing, the pH or the temperature or the nutrient supply or the oxygen. So like all of these measurements. Oh, maybe I'll just keep it like this without, yeah. Okay, cool. So, so these are all really early designs of a rotating disc bioreactor. And they started using this for growing organisms that produce microcellulose. So a very common example of microcellulose is SCOBY, which is stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And this is found in kombucha. So anytime you've, fermented kombucha at home by yourself, there's always this kind of layer of like fleshy stuff that's growing inside. So that's SCOBY. And in this rotating disc bioreactor, the SCOBY is actually growing on the discs, and they're really growing in this like kind of very alien way where they're aggregating much faster than static fermentation. And when I first saw this, it was actually from a friend, Emma, who I met a couple years ago in Barcelona during the Biofriction summer program. And she actually created a kind of tabletop version of the bioreactor because the one I showed before, these are very these are produced at like huge industrial scales because SCOBY is now considered kind of this new biomaterial that's made for, alternative textiles and for medicine and cosmetics. So there's a lot of money going into SCOBY production at the moment. So these bioreactors are happening at huge industrial scales, and Emma actually created a little desktop version. And I would encourage you checking out her Instagram because she's doing really cool experiments with SCOBY and fermentation. So when I met her, and I heard about this project, I thought it was really interesting because of this rotational movement. This constant rotation, it really kind of alludes to this constant wheel of progress that we're all kind of stuck on, as like a human species, and how we optimize the non-human. Like it's always in this trajectory of faster, higher, stronger, and we're kind of stuck in this simulation of capitalist aesthetics, right? So immediately I had this idea of connecting a bicycle, a human-powered bicycle, to the bioreactor so that it's the human that's supplying energy to the bioreactor and keeping it on constant rotation. And I was thinking about like what the implications are, right? Because the human cannot possibly cycle constantly, right? But then if the bioreactor stops its rotation, then everything starts to dry up and everything dies, right? So it created this kind of like kinship, but like a very like a tension as well between the human and the non-human. And it kind of makes you rethink, what are we putting these organisms through, right? Like what do they have to undergo? The same way that, what do the athletes undergo to win the gold medal at the Olympics? So what are we willing to sacrifice, to become faster, higher, stronger? So I started to, reconstruct or reproduce this experiment with the bioreactor. So first thing I did actually was, to make the discs. So this is one way to produce them is by 3D printing. And they actually have to be, they have to have these holes so that the SCOBY can grip onto the discs. And it works better if you kind of sand the discs so that there's more texture to grip onto. And then I decided to go with one of these water containers or water jugs because they're fairly easy to find and they're large enough, to make like this tabletop version. And it's kind of a long process screwing in all of the discs. In retrospect, I should have made the hole bigger so that my hands weren't so cramped getting all the discs in there. And then here is a basic schematic of how the electrical energy is supplied from the exercise bike to the bioreactor. This actually took many months of prototyping with my friend Pook, who is kind of my technician. He's also an explosives expert, so it's really fun working with him. But yeah, so we had to kind of figure out how this actually works. So every kind of exercise machine has like a flywheel. So it could be an exercise bike, it could be a rowing machine. So this flywheel, this is where you would connect a rubberized kind of roller motor. And then that motor would go into one of these hand crank generators that you can buy off of Amazon. And then that would convert the energy to electrical energy that is stored in the 12-volt battery. And then from that 12-volt battery, that would drive the motor that's connected to the shaft or like this metal bar inside the bioreactor. So that's like the general overview of how the electricity is flowing. And then here is the very first kind of prototype of the of the project. So originally it was called the SCOBY spin cycle. So kind of like when you go to the gym and you go to a spin class. So we wanted to create this kind of almost like a fitness installation where the human and the non-human humans are training together and building up these muscle masses. So let's see. So we had I don't know if you can see, but there is an endoscopy camera inside of the tank that is broadcasting a live feed to the monitor here. So we wanted to enlarge the presence of the SCOBY and almost to the size of the human, right? And there's this kind of eerie hypnotic effect happening when you're watching this broadcast video, because it's just like spinning at this it's at 7 RPMs, and it just has this very like hypnotic feeling. And over time, the SCOBY was definitely growing on the discs. The discs were actually much smaller in this first version, and then we made them bigger in the second version. Then I wanted to expand the installation to make it like a full kind of fitness gym. So luckily, I was commissioned by Contemporary Art Tasmania, and this was the installation that they created. So we had 3 bikes and 3 bioreactors. And they actually had an amazing team that was able to construct everything on their side. And we also included some red light therapy lamps. So that's what you see hanging above the exercise bikes. And red light therapy is supposedly it's good for muscle recovery, supposedly. So that's why we have those lamps hanging above. So it's kind of like you have like fitness and recovery at the same time. And then we didn't broadcast the SCOBY that large. We actually have them on these little tablets that are on these medical IV stands. And then what was really cool is that when the person starts biking, the bioreactor actually lights up. So I thought that was a really cool effect. And here are some close-ups. And so we also filled these water coolers with kombucha and SCOBY so that you can hydrate yourself with kombucha as you're training. And then here's a close-up of the bioreactor. So you can see the endoscopy camera here and the discs that they actually laser cutted. They didn't 3D print them. And yeah, and then there was this nice little casing here, which we reproduced in future shows. And the video that's being played right here is, so I started digging up a bunch of archival footage of athletes performing rotational movements. And then I slowed them down to exactly 7 RPM so that it's mimicking the rotation of the SCOBY in the bioreactors. So again, bringing that connection of the industrialized human and the industrialized non-human, and also like performing these perfect rotational movements, and again being caught on the endless loop of progress. And in another iteration, we actually put the video, instead of having it projected really big, we had it very small, like in the bioreactor casing, so that it looked like the tiny human was turning the bioreactor. So this was a installation. Actually, it was a solo exhibition for at Magic Stop Lausanne. It was a really cool location because it's actually a bus stop, and in this bus stop there was this empty space, and the curators decided to host a solo exhibition in this empty space. And actually across from this bus station is the official office of the Olympics. So if you guys didn't know, the official office is located in Lausanne in Switzerland. And so I felt like the project was really, rooted in this like historical ground, like, because literally you can, as you're exercising, you can see the flags, the Olympic flags, like waving in the distance. And it's just so symbolic. And then that's where, we decided to hand paint this distorted version of the Olympics logo on the wall. Um, and the reason why it's distorted is because, well, the only way to break the constant loop of progress is to disrupt the perfect circularity, right? Like a wheel is going to keep turning unless you bend the wheel, right? So that's why I have this like distorted version of the Olympic logo. And in this version, we also decided to create a rowing machine instead of having the bicycle, because the rowing machine is also one of the main like exercise machines that many athletes use in their training. And we actually constructed it from scratch, like DIY. So um, yeah, just to kind of keep in the spirit of, this DIY approach to this project. So this rowing machine was constructed completely from scratch. And again, like that's the flywheel where you connect the motor and into the generator, et cetera, et cetera. So what I love about this project is that, you can really adapt this system to any exercise machine that has a flywheel. So this was just like a really great proof of concept for us. And um, then the most recent exhibition was actually here in Vienna at the Angewandte Interdisciplinary Lab. And again, like we made the SCOBY really big, like that's the endoscopy footage right there. We had it very big. We had the exercise bike, and then we reproduced the box here. And because I was able to, because this exhibition was in Vienna, then I was able to, regularly check on the SCOBY and to see kind of the progress, because in the past I wasn't able to. It was always in like a faraway exhibition. So let me just play these videos. Oh, I think I can only play one at a time. Okay, so you can see that the liquid is filled right to the right below the shaft. This is the metal rod, which we call the shaft, because SCOBY actually, they really dislike growing in any metallic surface. So plastic works, glass works. I'm not really sure about porcelain or ceramics, but usually when you're growing SCOBY, it's usually in glass or in plastic container. When the SCOBY touches metal, it actually just dies. Like it just turns into this black, like goop. So it's really bizarre. So it's really important that the liquid doesn't touch the metal rod. But at the same time, so if the liquid gets too low, so these areas are where the disc is not in contact with the liquid. So this actually causes a contamination issue, because then, other microorganisms from the air will like come and start to colonize these surfaces. And then there's this weird kind of situation where the SCOBY is kind of in competition with the contamination, and there's like this border between the contamination and the healthy SCOBY. So like the SCOBY still thrives, like it's very healthy looking actually, and it's somehow able to resist this contamination happening in the center. And then because the contamination was getting worse and worse, I actually started over. And oh no, actually, no, I didn't start. This is after I had already started over. Then I topped up the liquid, and then the SCOBY actually like grew over the contamination. So you can still see like remnants of the contamination, but the SCOBY just like took over and like just grew over the contamination. So yeah, this is how the healthy SCOBY should look like. Yeah. And so you see this kind of like uncanny resemblance to like human flesh or like muscles, and even like when you touch it, it has this very like this very rubbery or like chewy kind of texture. And yeah, to me it's like super alien to see these like pumped up muscle SCOBY, you know. So so that's just after 13 days since we started the fermentation. And this is the harvesting. So I decided, okay, it's getting very overcrowded in the bioreactor, so I'm gonna harvest. And yeah, you can still see like the indentations of the disc kind of like imprinted in the body of the SCOBY. And then I brought the bioreactor with me, not the same one, but I had to construct a new one, and I brought it with me to the TTT labs. And yeah, and just did a workshop. I brought some of the SCOBY with me here, and so other people could kind of hack with it. Um, these are all like leftover discs that I didn't use, so I just used them for the workshop. And so yeah, here's like just a very DIY version, very DIY setup. So I'm just using like aluminum foil to connect the battery to the motor. And so you can see like when you take out the exercise machine from the whole installation, it's actually a pretty simple setup. And I'm actually going to just dive into the construction part because I think it'd be nice to just share the document. Um, so let me just switch to the document now. Yeah, because point. So yeah, let's get into the construction part. So I'm gonna pull up. Um, does anyone like? Do we have time for questions? Should we just do like a quick pause if anyone has any questions about the presentation before I get into like the technical and hands-on stuff?
While you and Jennifer are chatting about the bioreactor, we can also, bring in some questions at that time.
Good.
Lots of questions.
Like, as we go. So, or we can also
Sure,
wait till
you
the
want me
end to.
Well, we're talking about the bioreactor you're going to tell us about. Technically, I've been wondering if is it like an anti-gravity environment, like the ones that we would use in tissue engineering, or is it not? Because I noticed that just the internal mechanism is rotating, not the external container as well.
Yeah, so basically everything that's connected to the shaft, to this metal rod, is in rotation. So we actually attached the way that the metal rod fits into the bioreactor is with ball bearings. So we actually took them off of skateboard wheels, and that allows the discs to spin independently of the tank. Should be this one. Yeah. So I kind of put together like a kind of a Google Doc with yeah, just a materials list with like links and like kind of a price estimate, and and then with instructions. It's kind of a constantly evolving document, so that's why, I prefer to share the link versus a PDF, but you can always export it to a PDF. But yeah, so there's the water gallon. There's the threaded. Oh yeah, let me post the link in the can I post it in the chat? Yeah, I love to. Yeah, because always whenever I do any kind of public dissemination of my research or projects, always there's someone who's like, "Oh, have you tried this?" or "Have you tried to improve it like this?" And even at this BioFaro beach camp, someone suggested, "Oh, there's one way that you can attach the motor to the shaft in a more elegant way." And so yeah, so I love to share research, and I also like putting things on Google Docs so that people can also add to it, or like we can add like updates to the design. So can everyone access that? I just posted it to the chat. I don't know if it goes to the public.
Kitchen Hangout, and we'll add the link to our project website and also our link tree. So it'll be kind of highlighted after this.
Cool, very cool. Okay, so can everyone see the document? Because I'm sharing my screen right now, right? Okay, cool. Yeah, so then you have the metal rod, and then you have these nuts that are placed on each side of the discs and really tightened so that the discs are fixed in there. And then here are the ball bearings. We took them off of like skateboard wheels, but you can actually just buy the ball bearings themselves. So you don't have to like hack the wheels. And then here's the motor. So we picked a motor that already spins at exactly 7 RPM. And here's just like a standard 12-volt battery, which I was surprised that they let me bring this on the airplane. So if anyone's wondering, like you're allowed to bring this battery because it's a lead acid battery, and I think they're only concerned about lithium batteries. So yeah, and then here is the endoscopy camera. There's different versions. Mhm.
This is a lot of equipment, right? And it looks a little unusual. Do you have any
Yeah.
challenges in that regard?
So I used to have more challenges actually when I was carrying like large hard drives. Like I used to go around with like a 12 terabyte, 2 ter 12, yeah, I think it was like a 12 terabyte hard drive. So they always thought like, it looked like a bomb or something in the scan, um I used to go around also with like petri dishes with transgenic yeast, and I also carried, flammable reagents. Like I had methanol and I had like just a bunch of weird stuff. And they never really, I never got in trouble for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised what I've been able to get away with the airport security.
Thanks.
Yeah. But the 12-volt battery was kind of a new one for me. It was the first time I really traveled with that. So, um, yeah, and then here's the endoscopy camera. You can actually find really cool ones that have like their own Wi-Fi hotspot. And so that way, that's what allows us to broadcast a live feed to like a large monitor. So, um, and then we also need an aquarium heater because the SCOBY, they grow the best at exactly 28 degrees Celsius. And then here are various sizes of silicone tubing, and that's what we use to attach the shaft to the motor. But my friend just pointed me to a more elegant solution, so I have to update this document. And then this is just like a piece of wood, or you can use a cutting board to kind of secure the bioreactor so it's not like rolling away. And then here are angle brackets to secure the motor, a hole saw to make a hole for the motor here. And then we also need kombucha to start the culture. And it's really important that if you're buying kombucha from the store, that it is a unpasteurized source, because I think in the US, the kombucha, like you can get really good quality kombucha, but here in Austria and I think in Germany, um, a lot of the kombucha is pasteurized. So it's kind of like fake kombucha. So you don't really get like the same health benefits if you drink the kombucha here. My kombucha source is actually SCOBY that I brought over from Indonesia. So I kept it alive since 2019 when I had my residency in Yogyakarta. So I have a very resilient source of kombucha. Yeah, yeah, it's amazing how like the longevity of kombucha, you know, it can just like you can keep it going for like years and years. And then here's
Sure, of algae that I've been growing since I was pregnant. I couldn't work in my lab anymore, so I started growing algae in my basement when I was pregnant, and now it's like it's a part of my family.
wow, amazing. I mean, it's basically like a child, right?
Do you have an emotional relationship with your SCOBY?
Kind of. I mean, it's I've also made so many different recipes with it. Like I created this I call it my pink kombucha recipe where I use like dried berries to add like a extra flavor to it. And it's really interesting because it's also like a color indicator because when you first make it, it's just like this dark tea color. But then as the kombucha is fermenting and eating up all the tannins in the tea, then what's left over is the pink color of the berries. So when it's pink, then that kind of lets me know like, oh, the kombucha is ready to drink. So um, yeah, so I guess I have like a very like yeah, I have a very experimental relationship with my SCOBY. Yeah, and then these are just the ingredients for starting the fermentation. Because what you do is you actually make like all of the like the kombucha starter, and then you start the fermentation in the bioreactor. So, and then of course you need pH test strips because the SCOBY, it needs between 4.2 to 4.5 as the optimal pH. And then here are some additional tools. So like you need wrenches, you need a drill, you need an angle grinder to cut the hole in the water container. And yeah, here's the discs. You can laser cut or you can 3D print them. And then yeah, you just need a kitchen and basic kitchen supplies to make the kombucha. So I can actually wait, can you see me if it's still on the screen share? Okay, great. Okay, so I have the okay, cool. Okay, so this is the bioreactor that was in the exhibition in Vienna, and I actually just deinstalled it like a couple days ago. So um, unfortunately, it's really, really hard to clean the bioreactor like once there's like SCOBY growing in there. Um, it can get pretty gross. Like, I don't know if you can see the metal rod is like it's like very rusted and it definitely has to be replaced. So yeah, bioreactors can get pretty nasty over time. Um,
Single-use bioreactor, do you think?
I I think maybe like the metal rod is like single use and has to be replaced over time. I think the discs survived pretty well. Like I was able to clean them pretty well. These were 3D printed, so they took so long. I think each disc took like 8 hours to print. So I would hate to just like throw these away. So I definitely wanted to reuse the discs. Um, Here is the heater, the aquarium heater that I used. So I went with this like flat design so it fits better in the bioreactor. Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So we were going to do a prototype along with you in our lab, and we got looking at your discs, and you're right, yours took 8 hours. Ours was going to take like 20 hours to print. So we have a much slower printer than you have access to, but also the scale, the footprint of the disc was really large. Do you have access to very large bioprint, or not bioprinter, 3D printer that you're using, like the flat bed section?
Actually, my 3D printer, I think, is 200 by 200, which is kind of like a
Pretty
standard 3D printer. Yeah, you should actually be able to resize the discs in the printer program, because I like to print them with a diameter of 17 millimeters. Yeah, millimeters. So basically the same size as like a 7-inch vinyl disc, or I mean a vinyl record.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they're not as big as
because
I'm
I feel
thinking
like
they are.
that's the. Yeah, because you don't want them too large, or else there's not enough space for the SCOBY to grow. Because the SCOBY, the thickness like will
Wow.
get up to about there, like around the disc. So you want to leave some room for that.
What do you think about that? So the SCOBY itself is like beautiful and repulsive. It's like really disgusting. What is the role of disgust in this piece for you?
Yeah, I think it's something that you learn to embrace over time. Because when I first saw even just like pictures of the rotating disc bioreactor, I just had this like gut repulsion, and it just reminded me of like rotisserie chicken, like just
Like
like
intestines,
rotating.
rotisserie chicken.
Yeah, it just like gave me this really gross feeling like, oh, this looks so unnatural. But, anything that's like created post-naturally in the lab is kind of disgusting and grotesque anyway, and kind of like unnatural. But then, I do so much like fitness training and workouts and stuff, and I feel like the things that we do to our bodies is also like kind of weird and unnatural. Like if you go to the gym and you see all these machines, they're like like you have this huge machine just to work out like this one muscle here, and it's like um yeah, it's just crazy the way that bodies have been like measured and calculated and optimized in
And
certain
also
ways,
aestheticized. Like,
and
why is this one muscle right here bulging not considered as repulsive as us looking at the SCOBY growing, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's like we do all kinds of like really strange things to uh for like transhumanist reasons, for like enhancement reasons, and then also like I have this feeling of I also thought about plastic surgery, like when I was looking at the SCOBY flesh, like it just looked like especially when you cut into it, it feels like you're performing some kind of
Yes.
surgery. It's and it was funny because at the bio camp, at the beach camp, one of the participants, Eisen, she's an artist, but she works in a medical institution, and she was playing with the SCOBY, and she was practicing suturing on the SCOBY, and she was actually like sewing it closed. And she was like, yeah, you know, the SCOBY is a really great material to practice suturing. I was like, oh, I never thought about
I think
that.
that's one of the reasons why I find it repulsive is it looks like internal flesh, which is a little different than our skin, right? And
Yeah.
so it looks like internal human flesh. So I'm having that moment where the inside and the outside of the body are kind of collapsing. But then also that internal flesh is around this mechanism that is so clearly an industrialized shape. And so that's really like terrifying and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like it feels like the body has been turned inside out somehow. Yeah.
Do you have any other cool stuff you want to show us over there?
Yeah, I just wanted to show like this is what the hand crank generator looks like. So it's manufactured in China, and we basically just hacked it. So we like took it apart. So inside there's the motor, but we took out the motor and attached it to the flywheel of the bike. And then the cables here, we have it basically drawing energy from the bike and then redirecting that energy towards the battery. And here's the 12-volt battery. And it actually lasts surprisingly long, even without like exercising and supplying energy to it, because the rotation is at 7 RPMs, which is like very, very low energy draining. So it can actually last like a couple of weeks without being recharged, if you just were having it run without recharging it. And then, yeah, so in this, right now I'm on a different step. This is the step about the ball bearings. Yeah, and then here is one way to attach the endoscopy camera. I was using a soldering iron and just had it at a very high temperature and just made the hole directly in the plastic. And here is the part where you install the discs. And yeah, this part is the very DIY part where you're just putting layers of wood so that it's not rolling away or rolling off the table. And then this is where you would attach the motor. And it's very important that the shaft of the motor is connected directly to the shaft of the metal rod. Because if you have any kind of misalignment, it will actually turn unevenly. Like it's gonna wobble basically. And I mean, it still works, it just doesn't look as nice. So,
Wobbling, couldn't it?
yeah, so what happened was one of the discs in the very back of the bioreactor. So one of the discs that was positioned like here actually became loose, and so it stopped. So one disc stopped turning, and what happened was the top of it was completely dried out, and it got super moldy because like other organisms were like colonizing it. So it had this like kind of like a bluish green gray color that looked so disgusting, and it was like powdery, and like there was all these like spores coming off of it. It was really disgusting. So that was one half of the disc, and then the other half was like the super fleshy like SCOBY that was just like growing in like static fermentation. So it was like a very strange, and then there was like the border of like the healthy SCOBY competing with like this colonized part of the disc. So that was really weird to see. So that's why it's really important that the disc is in like a constant contact with the liquid, and that's how you get like the healthy SCOBY growing.
I noticed that the lid is open on most of your documentation. Do you leave it open for the exhibition?
Oh, that's a really good question. So for the exhibition, we actually had the team put like a plastic wrap over the open container when they closed the exhibition, and this would reduce the evaporation. And then in this version that we took to the beach camp, I actually kept the door, the piece that we cut out, and I kept it there to keep it covered all the time. And this really helps prevent evaporation, or else you're like constantly topping up with distilled water. So yeah, it's better to keep the door.
You know, I'm having these thoughts, like you're saying, oh, that gets contaminated on the top or around the center. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe if we just sterilized it more, kept it in a cleaner environment. And then I'm realizing, listening to you, that this battle, this cohabitation is part of what is happening in that culture. And that the idea of like sterilizing or removing these other organisms is probably impossible or not likely to the process. And I'm thinking back to an earlier discussion I just had today with Natalie, who's also here from the lab. We were doing a plant tissue culture workshop, and she explained to me that actually the microbes are inherent within the plants we're working with, and that we just need to find this beautiful, balanced environment where the microbes are not over-contaminating the plant tissue culture and the plants are allowed to, or able to do what they need to do. Is it similar with the SCOBY?
I think that the concept of balance is super, super key, because that's what it is actually, right? Like it is a symbiosis of the bacteria culture and the yeast culture working together and then producing this microcellulose. Um, Actually, I wonder like how many species are counted like in a SCOBY, in one, SCOBY culture, you know? Um, yeah, and I also found that the SCOBY was a nice metaphor for the Olympic Games because, they're trying to promote this like unity across nations and cultures. And I was like, yeah, the SCOBY is also this kind of like unity of various cultures. So, yeah, I think I'd like to investigate a little bit more. And also at the beach camp, one artist, Laura, she was doing these decellularization experiments. And I wanted to try decellularizing the SCOBY and just kind of see like what it looks like, when you when you strip away the cells and turn it into this kind of like ghost, like transparent, like will you see more texture? Like will you see like, is there like some kind of vein system or, like it's, I'm just wondering like what is actually going on like inside of the microcellulose.
I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I want to try it.
I have a question for you. Just wondering, what's the anticipated next step for this optimized flesh? What do you hope to create with it once it's created? When you were talking about that, the SCOBY that had the colonized, section that had all these different colors, and then the kind of healthy SCOBY at the bottom, I also kind of thought about these very like photographic, moments where like, what does a SCOBY look like? And are you kind of like featuring them as if we do, athletes and in their prime,
That's funny. I have a couple of ideas for like the next steps of this project. I would actually like to do a performance where we're harvesting the SCOBY, and then there's a method you can do where you're blending it up and it becomes this kind of like, yeah, like playing more with the materiality of the SCOBY. And I want to like rub it like on my body. I want it to like look like I'm adding muscles to my body. Um, and then I also thought about sculpting the Olympic logo, but like the distorted version with the material of the SCOBY, and kind of just letting it dry out and just kind of, form this distorted Olympic logo. And I've also thought about, this is actually from a conversation with Chris and Regina from the Art Lab Berlin, But, you know, they asked me, well, what would be the opposite of faster, higher, stronger? You know, like what would be like slower, lower, weaker, you know, like kind of like an antithesis of this kind of, you know, accelerationist, you know, desire of progress. Hi, Lola. Do you want to join the workshop?
And said I have to stop it in.
Okay, well, I'm almost finished, okay?
Right.
Yeah, and that made me think a lot about recovery because that's a very important process. I would say it's just as important as the actual muscle building process is the recovery process. And why, you know, like as a society, at least like in the Western world, we're so obsessed with like productivity. And we actually, you know, there's a bit of like guilt when we want to just like stop and rest, you know? So, um, yeah, so those are some other things I'm considering.
Which is interesting because when a SCOBY rests outside of its element, maybe it dries up and it can't continue. So what does that do to it? You know, this is great. Thank you so much. We have a couple of minutes. I don't know, Jennifer, if you have any last burning questions you want to ask Mary.
Mary answered all my questions. Oh, okay. I guess my last one is, how long can you keep one of these alive? Maybe in a gallery, and is it like and happy? But I wrote that before you showed us the contamination and said, oh, this is part of it. So, but maybe it's still happy if it's contaminated. Like how long can one of these last?
I feel like after 2 weeks, it seems to be very crowded in there. But it's really hard to say, like, what is a good time to harvest, you know, because I think at a certain point, maybe you have to restart the tea or you have to like add more sugar. Yeah, and also like, how do you measure the happiness, right? Because we actually don't know how they feel, you know, growing in such a crowded environment. You know, maybe they feel very claustrophobic, or maybe they feel like everyone's competing for the same nutrients. Or yeah, I think it's very similar to growing bacteria cultures or yeast in the petri dishes, and you have to like reculture them, you know, and sometimes they do dry out in the petri dish. And yeah, I think it's similar to the upkeep of any kind of living organism. Yeah.
Any last question from the lab group?
No problem with the flies.
Do you have any problems with flies?
Because in kombucha would
Oh.
sometimes.
That's funny. I didn't have any interactions with flies. I wonder if they're kind of repelled by the vinegar and like the acidity of the kombucha.
Yes, but the fruit fly, they love acetic acid.
Can you guys hear Natalie okay? Because she's not on my thing. Okay.
Yeah, I could hear. Yeah, I actually didn't have any contaminations with fruit flies. Yeah.
Should we do a toast before we go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary, we've all got a little bit of kombucha with us. Ours is just from the store. It's probably dead.
I actually just have water with me because I didn't keep any kombucha from the installation. But cheers.
Cheers to your
Thank
microorganisms. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, the microcellulose.
Cheers to you. Thank you so much for helping us close 3 years of Bioart Kitchen. It was great to hear about your project, your ongoing work. So fascinating. And thank you so much to the Incubator Art Lab for doing this series with us. At IOTA, we've had a blast, and we'll be toasting kombucha for the next little while, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, everyone. Hope to see you in person soon.
Yes. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.